What's up, guys? It's me again, Christian Rodriguez, and today I'm going to talk about Conor McGregor, right? A little bit of a case study I have for you, right? And there's something that I really noticed about McGregor, right? Out of all the UFC athletes, right? Out of all the UFC stars, I noticed Conor McGregor always relevant. He's always standing out. He's always among among the vast majority of people, right? Even like non UFC fans know who he is. They they want to see him, right? He's always relevant with the spotlight, right? And that's why I thought it'd be a great idea to make a video on him, right? And that's the funny part too. He hasn't fought in years, and people are still talking about him, right? And I know UFC, they're talking about having some sort of fight card in on the White House, right? On the White House lawn in front of the White House. And they're talking about having him on the card, which is like it's insane. He hasn't fought in a few years. Everyone will even say he's washed up. But it sounds like it's something that's serious. Like they're seriously considering it, right? And because of who he is, I think the brand aspect of it is super important, right? Because Conor is not just a fighter; he's more than a fighter, right? He's not just a UFC fighter that's famous. Like he's like more than that. Like he's on the next level, right? Because that's the thing. People who don't watch UFC know who he is. And people would pay for pay-per-views. They would pay to watch him fight. Right? They would watch his trash talks, his famous walk, right? That's distinct to him. I know I just did a terrible job mimicking it. His Irish accent while he was trash talking, it just stands out, right? Or his fashion, the way he would dress, everything about him was just brought attention to him, right? And it would make the fights more exciting, specifically from him, right? And like the top 5 most watched UFC pay-per-views of all time, all of them are Conor McGregor fights, right? Sure, sure, I'm not saying that he's the best fighter of all time, but I'm saying when it comes to like popularity and just getting people like to get attention on him, on like one person, it's Conor McGregor, right? People will tune in maybe because they love him, right? That's like a good reason why they tuned in. But also people who hated him, maybe they wanted to see him get knocked out, would also tune into the fights, right? And the thing is, either way, Conor was winning, right? Because attention was always on him, right? The top fighters will want to fight him because he obviously, though, they know they're going to get a big pay cut from him. They're going to get a good paycheck just from fighting him, right? And the funny part is, I mentioned that he wasn't the best fighter, and I would say like Khabib was a better fighter, right? Khabib was one of the best fighters. He had an undefeated streak. He had elite wrestling, right? But if we if you tell like a regular person about Conor McGregor, right? A person who doesn't watch UFC, a person who doesn't really know that much about like fighting sports or combat sports, right? If you tell them like who Mike Tyson is, they'll probably know who Mike Tyson is. If you tell them who Conor McGregor is, they'll probably know who Conor McGregor is, right? If you tell them who Khabib is, they're probably not going to know or care. If I told them who John Jones was, Stipe, or other UFC stars, they're probably not going to know. They're going to be like, "Oh, I don't know who that is." They're going to be lost. And that's the power of what Conor had. He had the power of the personal brand, right? Like Conor became a like it like when people outside of your realm know who you are, that's how you know you're a culture icon, right? The same happened with LeBron, the same happened with Tom Brady, the same happened with Messi, Ronaldo, right? Steve Jobs is another example. Outside of sports, Steve Jobs was a very big example of a tech billionaire who was very well known around the world. Elon Musk, just for example, right? And another key point I wanted to talk about was that attention is power, right? So I talked about this in the 48 Laws of Power. I think Conor was a master at applying this, and it's court attention at all cost, right? And he was always on the spotlight. He was always even he would even you would even see him at events. You would see him at maybe Hollywood events. You would see him in if there was a big boxing match, he would go. You would see him at Dallas Cowboys game, maybe before the game on the field throwing the football around with his suit. You would see him at he would be at very maybe big European soccer matches. He was just always relevant and he was always there and people always recognize him, right? He was a top celebrity. And another point that I wanted to mention, which I remember I watched a video in the past of Hermosi, Alex Hermosi, talking about attention is a new oil, right? And this makes a lot of sense, right? With Hermosi, I'm not gonna get too far into it. If you really want to know more, I recommend you look it up and watch the Hermosi video. But he talks about attention being the new oil, right? He talks about how attention, right? We all fight for attention. We all fight for being seen in the spotlight, right? You could like this video is competing with all the other content that you're watching, right? Like you chose to watch this video, but I was also competing with for your attention with other things you might be consuming online, whether it's on YouTube, it's on Instagram, it's on TikTok, it's on Snapchat, which I don't know who uses Snapchat anymore, but yeah, Facebook, whatever it is. Yeah, all of these are we're all competing for attention. And we're also competing with Netflix, Hulu, all the other platforms. So we're constantly competing for your attention. Conor was a master at getting your attention, which is why UFC, right? The top 5 most watched UFC pay-per-views were Conor's, right? And that's the thing. Another thing about Conor's fights is that they weren't treated like fights. They were treated like spectacles, right? His pay-per-view fights were literally spectacles. Like people would literally would plan in advance like their night, right? The night of Conor's fight, like where they would be, how they would watch it, which friends they're going to watch it with, or whose house they're going to go to watch the fight. Like Conor's fights became like something it was an event. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't treated like a regular fight, right? If you saw like another UFC, like 2 UFC fighters fighting, it's like, oh, like, yeah, it's just a UFC fight tonight. For Conor, it was, oh, we got to watch the McGregor fight. We need to go somewhere. It was that serious, right? And that's the point of the video. The video is that he became a brand, right? He's like I mentioned this, but he's a brand. And that's the thing, right? People resonate with brands. People like brands, right? Look, he had an underdog story, right? He was working in the trades and somewhere in Ireland, right? He came from nothing. He was poor, right? People can relate to that. People can relate that he struggled. He came from nothing, right? And fighting made him very successful, right? He was also like the best self marketer, whether it was directly or indirectly, probably because of UFC. Obviously, it's because of UFC, because he's always on the spotlight. He had the Irish accent. He was the best trash talker. He was also well dressed. I think it was also I think it was a combination of those different factors. And also there was a point he was destroying everyone in the ring. So I think all of those combination of factors just made him into uh, a marketing magnet for the UFC, right? And the lesson, right? The lesson that I think we can learn from this is that talent alone isn't going to get you where you want to be, right? And I'm not shitting on Khabib. Khabib is freaking rich. Khabib is doing his thing. That's great. But in terms of talent, right? Like he's not nearly as famous, right, as Conor McGregor, even though he's a better fighter. That's an example of it, right? Even though he's a better fighter, right? Outside of UFC, People don't know who he is. That's the truth. No one knows who Khabib is outside of UFC. Inside of UFC, if you watch fighting sports, maybe if you're a boxing fan, you might pay attention to UFC, so you might know who Khabib is. But if you just don't watch any sort of fighting sports, you don't know who Khabib is. But Conor is different. Conor, people know who McGregor is because of that, right? And that's the takeaway is that you can't just rely on talent, because if you're very talented but no one knows you exist, then it doesn't really matter, right? I'll give you an example, right? Robert Kiyosaki, the author of The Rich Dad Poor Dad, right, and other books too. He talks about that. He has a quote mentioning that he's not the best selling author. I mean, he's not the best writing author. He's the best selling author, right? Because maybe he's not the best writer. There's definitely better writers than him, but he's one of the better selling authors, right? And there's writers who probably didn't make any money from their writing. That's just an example of it, right? And when it comes to like gaining status, right? There's many different ways that you can gain status, right? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a famous MMA fighter or athlete to gain status. You could do it like in a smaller scale or in a different scale, right? You could do it from your physique, right? Maybe you're the most in shape guy in the room. Maybe you show up to an office party, or yeah, maybe you show up to work and you're the guy who's in shape. Maybe you're at the gym and you're one of the most in shape guys at the gym, right? It could be business, right? Maybe you started a business from nothing, from zero, right? You started it off as a startup all by yourself. You built it up, you scaled it, you built it to become a successful business, and you sold it for $30 million, right? That's a status symbol. That makes you an authority in that field, right? So you can easily gain status from that, because people are going to want to know, oh, how did you do that? Can you mentor me? Can you teach me? What should I do? What's the one thing I should do? What books have you read? Now people suddenly care on what you did because you sold a successful business, right? And you built it from nothing. Right, the corporate grind. Maybe you started at 18, maybe at 21 you graduated college, you got a corporate job, and you were a nobody. You started off at the bottom of the ladder, and then you worked your nuts off. You even sacrificed your weekends, right? Maybe the boss is calling you to get something done or do this, or you were dealing with stuff and you were just climbing up the ladder little by little, and maybe 10, 15 years later you finally got the promotions and the positions, and now you're making well over $200,000 a year, right? That's a status symbol within itself, right? You have a high position, that's a status symbol, right? Social media. Obviously, this is the very obvious one. You could have a high Instagram with a blue check mark. You could have a ton of followers. You could have people mentioning in your comments how much your stuff is helping them, right? That's just a brief example of it. That's a status symbol right there, and people see it. It's better than a business card, I would argue, right? And there's a bunch of other forms of status you can use as well. Those are just some examples I wanted to provide you. But yeah, like the way I see YouTube, right? Like personally, why I do it for my own for my personal reasons. The way I see YouTube like a seed. Even though YouTube right now YouTube takes a long time to grow, right? You have to be patient with it. You have to be willing to post videos and get little views from it, right? Because that's how it's going to go. But the more you post, the better you get at it. Also, the little by little, you're going to start growing an audience. But that takes time. It takes patience, right? That the algorithm to YouTube is learning from you. But long term, I believe it's going to make my life easier, right? It's going to make my life a lot easier because I'm going to have some form of status in place. I'm going to have some sort of brand in place, right? And I don't know exactly how it's going to entail for me, but I'm taking steps towards it with YouTube, right? And that's the thing. There's different ways. I'm not telling you to become an influencer or become a content creator and post on YouTube. I'm just telling you that these are different paths that you can take to do it, right? And let's be honest, like fame, like attention, it gives you financial leverage, right? Like Connor, right? His whiskey business. He started his own whiskey business selling, and the thing is, it's successful. He became insanely rich because of it. He became more rich because of it, right? And it scaled globally, right? And the reason why he was able to sell it is because people know who he is. If he was a if people didn't know who he was and he was some regular guy, right? Maybe he was just some normal guy. He just started a whiskey company. He probably would have to go to each liquor store. He probably would have to go to hundreds, maybe thousands of liquor stores around Ireland, maybe the US, maybe the UK to sell his whiskey, to see people who would sell his whiskey, right? And it would just be a lot harder to sell at scale. But since he is well known and he's successful in UFC, his track record, people just like him, right? And people are more likely to buy from someone that they like, right? And since they are more willing to buy from someone that they like, he could sell at scale a lot easier around the world, right? And when I say liking, I mean I'm referencing to the liking principle from influence, right? And he, I don't think his whiskey, like I've tried it in the past. I didn't think it was anything out of this world. It wasn't anything special, right? But it doesn't have to be the best whiskey. What it needs to be is under Connor's name, right? Since it's under Connor, people like Connor, people are more likely to buy his stuff. So he's well liked, right? And what was that? What's the next? So what's so like how can you take away from this, right? Like what are your takeaways from this? The thing is, I'm not telling you you need to be the center of attention, right? But say you have like some sort of business. You have to find a way to make your business the center of the attention, right? That's what you have to do. Because if your business is the center of attention, you don't have to be the center of attention, but if your business is the center of the attention, then people are gonna go whatever, if they need your business for whatever thing they do, they're gonna pick your business first, right? Like something I'm doing, I'm helping businesses. I'm helping like plumbers, local businesses, right? With AI automation. And I notice a lot of businesses have lead issues. Why is that? Because a lot of people don't know those businesses exist, right? So attention is really the big part of it, the big factor of it, because a lot of these businesses are very talented, right? A lot of the business owners, they know what they're doing, they're talented, but they don't have enough attention towards them, which is why marketing is super important, right? And another thing, even in dating, I'm not even just this. That's just a business example, but even in a dating example, right? Dating would be far easier if the women that you're attracted to know you exist. That's part of the battle. So you probably have to get into the right areas, the right neighborhoods, the right cities. You probably have to be in the right frequent the right coffee shops or the right gyms, right? To be around these people often, right? Because it just makes it far easier that way. So people like things that they're familiar with. And that's basically what Connor leveraged over a period of time, right? And that's why you need to build trust, right? You need to find a way to leverage ways of building trust. And I'm not saying that Connor is the most trustworthy guy, but I'm saying that Connor leveraged his trust with UFC, right? His UFC success and UFC marketing him. He was able to leverage it into something even more powerful, something even bigger than himself, right? And that's what allowed him to become a successful cultural icon. And I'm going to leave it at that. I appreciate you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe and take care.